Hello friends, this is Worm and it is What If Wednesday, so let's what if some stuff in Destiny 2, and what if Destiny had a 12-player activity? Now before we go any further, I want to make sure to point out, yes, I've heard the rumors of an alleged 12-person activity that's coming with the final shape. Do I think it's going to happen? I don't really know. I don't put a whole lot of stock into rumors unless they come from incredibly verified sources. And from what I can tell in these rumors, they haven't come from incredibly verified sources, just kind of somewhat here and there, kind of through the grapevine stuff. But with that being said, 12-person activity, this is not like a new idea in Destiny 2 by any means. We have been, I don't want to say asking, but we've imagined having a 12-person activity for years in Destiny. Ever since D1, we got, you know, the raid, and it was a 6-person thing. We knew that Crucible could have up to 12 people in it. Currently, Crucible is the only activity that can have 12 people in it. But it's one of those things that it's been around. It's not a new idea or anything like that. But I figured we would entertain the idea of what a 12-man activity would look like. And I think the very first and foremost thing that we need to do is we need to consider what kind of activity would host a 12-person activity. Now, I want to start with raids because I know that one of the alleged rumors that was going around for a little while was that the raid that's coming with Final Shape is going to be a 12-person raid. And I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but that's that's definitely not going to happen. The reason why I say this is not going to happen is because Bungie has formulas that they build stuff around. For example, strikes. Strikes have always been 3-person activities. You don't get 4 or 5, 6 people in strikes. Same thing with raids. Raids only have 6 people in them. They've only ever had 6 people in them. Dungeons have only ever had up to 3 people in them. So this is a formula that Bungie is following, and I do not see them breaking it for some big bang. Right? I don't see them breaking the formula that they have developed over the past 10 years because they want to try something new. And honestly, Bungie knows the Final Shape is not a good place to try something new because the Final Shape is already like in a rough spot as it is. So I do not think that we will get a raid, and I don't really want a 12-person raid. I think that, I mean, guys, imagine instead of having to learn like 4 or even 5 roles for a raid, if you want to be proficient at it, now you have to learn 9, 10, maybe 11 roles. Like, that would be ridiculous. I mean, I already struggle as it is to remember how to do every single encounter, every single role on every encounter. You know, somebody's like, hey, can you take the debuff on Aatrax? I'm like, refresh me real quick. You know, I don't think I could handle a 12-person raid. It's like, oh, we need somebody to do this thing. And I'm like, I've done literally 6 other positions, but I've never done this position. Like, tell me what I got to do. Then I got to cram another one up in there. And then I forget one of the old ones. Like it's just, it sounds like a ridiculous amount of you know, action going on, and it's very difficult to remember something like that. So yeah, I don't think that a 12-person raid is really going to be a viable option. Plus, it would be so chaotic. Like, imagine a 12-person raid in LFG. Like, that would be absolutely chaotic and, quite frankly, miserable. So I think raids off the table. Obviously, we already have Crucible. Crucible is technically 12-player activity, but it's a little bit different than all other Destiny content. And of course, it's not like it's not Guardians working together. It's 6 Guardians versus 6 Guardians. Like, the enemy of the Crucible is literally the other team. You don't have PvE enemies inside of PvE, with the exception of some specific game modes. But with that being said, other activities that could potentially have 6 players, and really the only place I see another 12-player, the only other place I could see a 12-player activity coming in at is with seasonal activities, because Bungie's only had 2 6-man PvE activities. Those have been seasonal activities. Oh no, I take that back. 3: Dares of Eternity, seasonal activities, and of course raids. We already talked about why they won't do it for raids. They probably won't do it for Dares of Eternity because Dares of Eternity is older content. They're probably not going to go in and, you know, remodel it and remake it, because there's a lot of stuff that goes into increasing the number of players that would be, you know, able to fairly interact with the enemies and stuff in there. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a second. So that leaves just one, and that is the seasonal activity. And the beautiful thing about the seasonal activity, even though Bungie's never done a 12-person activity, it seems like seasonal activities are very malleable to Bungie. I mean, we've had seasonal activities that are public events, class as public events. We've had seasonal activities that are, specific missions. We've had them with 3 players. We've had them with 6 players. We've had the ability to launch them solo. We've had, harder difficulty variants where we can get certain exotics from and stuff like that. And so I don't think it's that crazy to think that Bungie could potentially design a seasonal activity with 12 people. So possibly a seasonal activity could be something we see a 12-person activity for, or of course the last one is a brand new activity that we've never heard of, never seen before, aka a horde mode. Bungie, please. But with that being said, I want to talk about the idea of a seasonal 12-man activity. First of all, why do I think a seasonal 12-man activity is the most likely? Pretty simple. Like I said, Bungie's been very malleable about seasonal activities and how many people can be in them, 3, 6, whatever. But also, seasonal activities are made on a season-by-season basis. Typically, take for example, Season of the Deep, or take for example the Coil/Riven's Lair. Like, these are places that we've never been to in game before. So Bungie had to make these from scratch over the course of however many years they had been going on with making certain content. So Bungie could build an arena designed for 12 people, and we'll talk more about what that arena would look like in just a second. But I think that is kind of one of the key points there. You could also talk about ad density and stuff like that, but I think that a seasonal activity makes the most sense. You could also say that Bungie could add a completely new activity like a horde mode. I think the biggest issue with adding a new activity is just like we have with Gambits. People may not like it and may not play it, and it will never get love again. And Gambit is kind of an example of that. Gambit was added way back in the day, and it was this cool mode for a little while, but then it lost its luster. People started realizing that, hey, it's not fun to get smacked with heavy weapons every time you go to invade, or every time you invade, you're getting smacked with heavy weapons, which is ridiculous. It's still a problem that exists in Gambit. And so Bungie just, since people don't care for it, Bungie just doesn't touch it, doesn't update it. And that's what I would see being potentially being a problem if you added a whole new 12-man activity that wasn't a seasonal style content. But with that being said, I want to talk more about what a 12-man activity would actually look like, because I think there are some important variables that you have to consider when designing a 12-man activity. Number one, the size of the actual arena/area that you're in. And this one is, it's pretty straightforward. If you have a tiny arena with 12 guardians, is it going to be fair for everybody? Is everybody going to be able to have fun and get kills? Probably not. And we'll talk about density here in just a second, but probably not. I think when it comes to an arena, you would probably want an arena that is pretty large so that every guardian has their own roaming space, so to speak. But if guardians wanted to, say you wanted to play a support warlock or something like that, you can move to another area and support another guardian, which would leave that area undefended, which would add more ads for other people to take care of, which I think most players in Destiny would probably agree. Taking care of ads, pretty fun. It's pretty fun to mindlessly destroy everything in a room. But the arena itself would have to be, like I said, it would have to accommodate for that play style, that roaming play style, because guardians, we don't sit still. With the exception of warlocks and warlocks and bubble titans, like they sit still, but neither here nor there. We don't like to sit still. We like to move around. We like to constantly be active. If enemies are pouring in and they stop pouring in, we want to go to where the enemies are to help our team or really just take the kills. So the size of the arena would need to be pretty big to accommodate for that whole instance. And what I've kind of imagined here is, a 3 or 4 section arena where it's built around having 3 guardians or 4 guardians in each section. And of course, the guardians can move to other sections. They can move, like we lost somebody over here, we need somebody to come help us. Okay, so then, guardian in arena A moves over to arena B, and now arena A has, a lot more stuff going on over there because they're a person down. But the free movement is still a feature here. But I think separating the guardians in their own little areas would be potentially one of the better ways of going about this. Because again, if you have 12 people in a room just killing everything, the inevitability is somebody's not going to be getting killed, somebody's not going to be having fun. And especially hardcore veteran players that are able to get those kills are going to drive newer players or players who are less experienced out, because those newer players slash less experienced players are going to be like, what's the point of doing this? Like all the hardcore players are doing this and I can't get any kills, and that's going to kill the game mode. But with that being said, of course, we also need to talk about ad density, and this is the other like major point to be had about this. And this is one of the things that I feel the reason why we haven't had an activity similar to this is because of ad density and the problems that it brings with it. But let's talk about what kind of ad density that you would need. Of course, main thing, you need enough ads that every Guardian has, you know, concentrated ad groups that they have to be focusing on. If you have 500 thralls run into a room, but Risk Runner, for example, can just instantly wipe them all out, what's the point of it? But at the same time, if you have, you know, 5 bosses spawning in a room, again, it's like, that's kind of boring. Like, it's boring to just fight 5 bosses at once. Like, you need a healthy mixture of red bar, yellow bar, orange bar enemies that can kind of evenly distribute where Guardians are, where concentrated fire is coming from. And I think that having too many red bars when we have such powerful builds and weapons would potentially be detrimental to the, you know, to the health of said 12 player activity. And again, this also ties into why I said, you know, maybe dividing the arena up into 3 or 4 different sections, so that if one person is taking all the kills in one section, they're not taking all the kills from everybody. But moving on, that's neither here nor there. When it comes to the ad density, like, you need to have a healthy mix of red bars, orange bars, yellow bars. And I think that another important thing that you would need for a 12-person activity is you would need varying spawns. You know, a door in the wall and a door on the floor don't cut it. Like, we need, you know, 3 or 4 doors. We need 3 or 4 hole in the ground spawns. We need 3 or 4, you know, drop in from the sky spawns. Like, enemies need to be coming on all sides. What is like if you think about combat, what is more entertaining as combat? Enemies that are coming straight at you from just your front, where you can put down, like, say, a rally barricade and go to town and just mow them down, or enemies that are spawning on all sides of you, where you have to constantly be alert on, hey, you know, where are enemies coming from? You know, do I have enemies behind me? Do I have, you know, a fellow Guardian behind me watching my back? Like, the hectic battlefield needs to have, in my opinion, it needs to have that element of, I've got to be on high alerts. Like, I've got to make sure that, you know, enemies aren't going to come from behind me or from the side of me or something like that. And I think that that's another important feature that Bungie would need to add. I think that also encouraging team play, it kind of builds onto this. But, you know, if you're watching one way and you have a Guardian at your back watching the other way, and so you have 2 more on your left and right, and everybody's kind of watching their own little way, like, it could, you know, provide that teamwork element that lots of people like in Destiny 2. But again, it's not something that every casual player will be able to do. Like, you know, it's teams that are in communication that would probably set up, you know, a system like that where, hey, like, let's go back to back. You watch this side, I'll watch this side, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, one of the issues I think with ad density, and the reason why we haven't seen something like this just yet, is because there can only be so many ads spawning at once. For 2 reasons. Number one, it could just be on Bungie's and just a spawn limits. You know, you can't have 5 enemies come out the door at once, so you have to have them come out one at a time. Well, when they're all thrall, how easy is it to kill 1 thrall? And then, of course, once you get 2 or 3 of them out that same door, you know, you have something like Volt Shot, for example, or Incandescent or Dragonfly, you're going to obliterate a bunch of thrall at once. And so I think that that's, you know, that's one of the reasons why I said you need multiple spawn points, because you can only have a certain number of enemies coming out the door at a time. But I think that another issue and another reason why Bungie hasn't done something like this is possibly because of old gen consoles not being able to handle the stress load of having like 50 ads coming out of one like specific area on a map. I mean, I literally can think of like 2, maybe 3 examples in Destiny 2 currently that have just an absolute ton of ads constantly just coming at you. Well, Shuro Chi, for example, is one. Like, I don't know how many thrall spawn there, but it's a lot of thrall at once, but it's not 50. I know that there's not 50 thrall spawning at once. I don't know how many it is. I'd love to know, but you know, in a 12-person activity, you would need your game and your system to be able to handle spawning 50, 60, 70, I would even as much as 100 enemies plus to compensate for Guardian's ability to kill. If you have, I would argue that if you have less than like less than 144. That's, what is that? In a 12-person activity, that'd be roughly 12 ads per player, which is not a lot. That is not a lot, but 144 ads spawning at once would absolutely destroy old gen consoles. It would probably destroy lower end PCs and stuff as well, because that's an absolute ton of enemies to spawn at once. And so I think that Bungie would have to figure out some way of not, allowing that many, either not allowing that many ads at once, but also compensating for the Guardians, like, entertainment. Or they would have to drop old gen consoles / low level, or not low level, but low tier PCs. And that's not really something I think that Bungie is looking at doing anytime soon. So yeah, that's in terms of ad density, that's kind of that. And then finally, we could talk about like what would actually be going on within this 12-person activity. Now, we know that in things like the Coil and other seasonal activities, there are smaller objectives, take the torch to the flame bowl, and do this or do that, like small little tasks. But the primary point or the primary action in something like the Coil is killing enemies. And because that's the most fun thing to do. And I think that one of the ways Bungie could potentially lower the ad density level is spawning less ads, but having more intense challenges that you have to do. Like, hey, you've got to take this thing up to the top of this pillar. Pretty easy enough. Oh, except for when you pick it up, it's considered a heavy object, so you can't double jump, you can't attack with, or you can't, use your weapons or your abilities or anything like that, and you're walking slow, so your team has to escort you up. Like, I think stuff like that thrown in there could potentially be a fun factor. But again, it runs kind of into the same issue. Like, if you divided an arena up into 4 sections, for example, and you had 3 people in each section, like, what's the point of doing a 12-man activity when you could have a 3-man activity in one section of the arena doing the same thing? Or better yet, you have 3 people in this massive arena with a ton of ads spawning that have to do the same thing. Like, I think that's the reason why we haven't seen a 12-person activity is well, one of the reasons, I should say, why we haven't seen a 12-player activity is because, how do you keep Guardians all together, entertained, enough ads, enough stuff to do, so to speak, without anybody feeling left out or bored, without dividing the team up to the point where it's like, what's the point of having 12 people, like, whenever we're doing our own thing over here and they're doing their own thing over there? But yeah, I don't know. This video has gone on for almost 18 minutes, so that's my What If Wednesday here. What if Destiny had a 12-player activity? It's some of the reasons why I think they potentially haven't had one, and some of the things I think that they could do to make one. But yeah, I want to hear your thoughts on it. What do you think about a 12-person activity? What do you think about my ideas? Let me know in the comments. Of course, if you like today's video, drop a like. It helps the channel out a lot. Subscribe for more daily Destiny content, and do me a favor, watch the videos you see here on the end screen, because for whatever reason YouTube thinks you'll like them. Guys, I'll see y'all next time. Bye for now.